Hello, and welcome to On the Irregular with Java Berry, a podcast where I chat to women from all walks of life about their own unique creative journey, how they got here, how their story has shaped their creative work, what they've learned, what has helped them, and where they plan to go from here. It's an irregular journey for so many of us, and I am delighted to offer a platform to share these fascinating stories and wells of wisdom. This week I am talking to clinical scientist, photographer and writer Emma Goulding. From the moment we started talking, we went in deep. You will hear me wax lyrical about Emma's self-portraits, and I cannot encourage you enough to follow her on Instagram for both her images and her words. Starting with the heart of a tree, we moved on to thoughts on sharing personal stuff on Instagram, emotional growth, Emma's experiences as a black woman in a heavily white environment, and how photography has been a conduit for Emma discovering writing as a creative outlet. Trigger warning, this conversation includes personal anecdotes of racist behaviour and microaggressions. This episode also contains 2 mild mentions of the F word. Welcome to episode 10 with Emma Goulding, where we delve into the big, deep life stuff, as I always knew we would.
It's so lovely to finally kind of meet you, Emma.
It's nice to meet you too.
We've had like an internet friendship for, what is it about? It's not been long at all, actually. I think it was possibly October 2020, and we met on the Melia's photography course. I think I saw some of your photos of, was it a cacao bean or
a cow bean?
No, not a cacao bean, or like a cocoa bean.
Oh no, that's not me.
No, it was you. It was like a shape. It was like a concave shape.
Oh, I know what it is. It's my reconnector.
Oh, what?
I was like, I don't take pictures of things. I only take pictures of me. What can she be talking about? It's called a reconnector, and it's how to describe it. It's a wooden artifact.
Yeah.
Which is hand carved from. Oh no, what wood is it? I don't remember, but I will send you a link to it on Instagram afterwards. So there's an artist who lives in the Norwegian forests, pretty much alone, but occasionally has like friends out to stay, called Janik Abel. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. Scandinavian's not my mother tongue. And they carve things from wood, and they make wooden installation art, and they carve like wooden spoons, and so from very tiny things to very huge things, and sort of live off the land to an extent. So from these trees that they find fallen in the forest, they carve them by hand with an axe and then a smaller tool. Again, woodworking is not my forte. To chisel these, I don't know. It's like a tree heart, I think of it as. And it's to reconnect people with nature and trees, and they're all completely unique, and it's such a beautiful thing. I love it so much, and it smells all woody, and it's so tactile. My entire family are in love with it.
Wow, that sounds beautiful. Because when you said reconnect, I was thinking like something like a connector to a laptop. I was like, that did not look like something technical.
No, it's definitely not that.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, and I got that. In fact, that leads us right back to the Melia's Lost in the Light course. So on the first run of the course that I did in January 2020, I met Maria Portway. Do you know of her on Instagram?
No, I don't.
She's a photographer who has recently done a small range for Century General Store. Don't know if you follow those either.
Yes.
I assume that everybody follows the same people that I follow.
Yeah, no, I love them. They've got such a beautiful ethos and just way of conducting business. Yeah.
So I met Maria first, and I found Century through Maria, but and I found Janik through Maria, and they were running a competition. It was their birthday, and they said they wanted to give away, I think it was they wanted to give away 1 reconnector, and you had to nominate somebody. And I nominated Maria because she'd had a really tough time recently and was feeling really low. And she nominated me. And so Janet gave us both one, which was really lovely.
Oh.
So it's a sort of reconnection with nature and my little connection with Maria as well.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Wow. That's because it looks like it's such a beautiful description. It's like the heart, a tree heart. And I think what really stuck with me and is something that I've really loved about the photos, you know, that one of the things that I love about your photos was the light that you captured on this. It was just this like golden light pouring in on your reconnector, and the shape of it in your hands, and like it was like, just when I think of it now, I just think of like ochres and deep velvets and magic. It was so beautiful.
Oh,
And then since then, of course, I now know you make for your way of your kind of photography is self-portraits, really, isn't it? That's very, very clear. Because I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I wrote down, I've just been scrolling through your Instagram just before talking to you, because I was like, I just want to kind of reconnect with Emma before we have a chat. And I was trying to think like what is it that I'm seeing, and I was seeing so many things in your photos because they're so powerful. But I ended up writing down a list of all of the words that your photos evoked.
Oh,
So,
this is excellent. Let me write them down.
Yeah, I'm gonna read them out to you. So drama, power, tenderness, self-reflection, whimsy, life force, mental health, light, dark, truth, pain, the sensual. And then you came on to Zoom, and so I wasn't able to carry it anymore. But I could have carried on. There's your photography. You tell such beautiful stories, and of course your words as well. You're so articulate, but not just articulate. You're emotionally articulate as well, and you put things into words that are so huge and so powerful, and are often quite hard to express. And you manage to capture that both visually and with words. And I think it's one of the, I mean, you know, it's one of the reasons that I just find your work so fascinating. You know, it's not wishy-washy in the slightest, is it?
My God, thank you. It's a good job we're not on video anymore, because I'm just like, oh my God, that's so lovely, that's so kind. I'm all sort of like cuddled up around my heart with my hand on my chest going, oh.
It's true.
Thank you.
It's really true.
Because that's like literally what I'm trying to do. So it's always lovely when people feel what I want them to feel from my art. And it's interesting that a lot of, well, not interesting, it's good, because that's what I was aiming to do.
Yeah.
That a lot of those words that you used are words that have been, so you know that first exercise that you do on Lost in the Light, 10 by 10, a lot of them are the words that I have used to describe my 10 by 10 inspiration boards.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
Particularly the light and dark, and the power and tenderness and all. It's good to know that I'm doing what I'm trying to do.
You are channeling it so clearly. That's really, really big work, you know, that you're putting out into, you know, I draw flowers.
Oh, they are beautiful flowers.
You know, but yours feels soul searching, you know.
It is, and I do take photographs of other things. It wasn't a deliberate decision to do self-portraiture. So, as I said, I started Lost in the Light in January. I bought my big camera, as we call it, the big camera, in November 20. Oh God, the years are all merging into one. 2019, I guess. The last November before the pandemic. So I was about to turn 40, and I was going on a special trip, girls' trip, with my friend from where I grew up, to New York. We've been planning it for years because we didn't do anything special for our 30th birthdays. We were going to New York for our big ones.
Yeah.
And the bought, I don't know why, I was like, right, I'm going to New York. I need to document it properly. I'm going to buy a DSLR. I don't quite know what the thought process was there. So I sort of researched it and bought my camera. And then as I started trying to use it, I realised that it takes more than a fancy camera to take good photographs.
Yeah.
And so in January, I signed up for Lost in the Light. And then I was drawn towards portraiture. I just love photographing people. And I like photographing landscapes and, you know, still life as well. But I just didn't feel that same connection. So I was taking lots of pictures of my kids while I was practicing and my husband. But then lockdown happened. And I was very quickly limited to not being able to. So I wanted to sort of hone my skills on my family and then start branching out into photographing friends. But that obviously didn't happen because of lockdowns. So I was stuck photographing my family, and my kids are 12 and 10. So as I'm sure you can imagine, they very soon tired of having my lens stuck in their face.
Yeah.
And they weren't interested in being my subjects anymore. And occasionally with the right kind of bribery, I could get them to sit for me. And when I say sit for me, I don't mean I wanted them to come and pose. I mean that I wanted them to carry on doing what they were doing, but not put their hands over their faces or just put a stupid face so I couldn't take their picture, which is what tends to happen now still.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking pictures of myself just sort of because that's all I had.
Okay.
And I can't remember which was the first photograph where I sort of started thinking that it could be a way of, I can't remember the term that you used, but it was perfect. I tend to think of it as sort of self-interrogation, the perfect way to do that. And I do have a lot of baggage to unpack. And I'm not quite sure what made me think that Instagram was the place to do that with my photographs. But yeah, the two just sort of kind of ended up going together. And as it's gone on, my Instagram grid has ended up being kind of like a public journal.
Yeah.
Not quite sure how healthy that is, but it seems to be okay for now.
Yeah.
And I do tend to, there's a lot of good advice about writing from the scar, not the wound. So I don't tend to write about things that I'm in the middle of. But on very rare occasions, like recently, then there's something that comes up and I feel compelled to write about something that's happening right then. But usually I'll try and process it and come the other side of it before I write about it, just to protect myself a little bit.
Yeah, I think the way I think I heard it worded for the first time was only don't write about anything that's unresolved within you. And I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I try and do that, but there's been a couple of times that I've written about something that's still quite, an open wound. And even though I've never had bad feedback, I've often regretted it afterwards because I just felt I wasn't ready to share that. I really wasn't.
Yeah.
It's hard, it's hard when you're kind of used to sharing. And like you said, because I'm similar to you, that my online presence is very much a journal. And that's how you connect with people often, isn't it? And so I sometimes have to kind of like pull myself back and go, right, wait a minute. Do you want to share this? What could be the outcome of this? How could you feel about this in a few days' time? But, if I've had a glass of wine, that goes out the window.
Oh, dear. I don't think I've actually shared anything and regretted it afterwards yet. Not saying it won't happen, but I do have a lot of things that I think, how to express this, that I need to work through, and I feel like writing is the way to work through them. And it's kind of why I'm not posting as much at the moment. I mean, there's lots of reasons why I'm not posting much at the moment, but part of it is there is a lot of things that I need to resolve, and I do maybe need to write my way through them, but it's not necessarily for public consumption. But something that I feel a lot, and the reason why I do feel compelled to share things, and I was saying I don't know why I feel like putting it on Instagram, is that I have found, like you said, you put things out and you don't ever get a negative reaction, and even though sometimes it still makes you feel like you wish you hadn't, I have sort of put things out and like felt that slightly sick anxiety feeling before anyone responds, or before it sort of dies down, where you're thinking, is someone going to say something? But the response is always good, and the thing that I think keeps me going back and doing it is not sort of the validation of everyone going, oh, this was a lovely thing to share. It's the feeling that, or the knowledge that it's helped someone else, because quite often when I share things that do feel a bit vulnerable, a lot of people will come forward and say, I felt like that, I'm glad you spoke about this because it makes me feel more able to speak about it. And it's that sort of, I don't know, not, it's in a sense like I don't feel like I'm giving people permission, but in a way it does seem to give people a sort of permission, and it feels like everybody's always waiting for permission, even though we shouldn't have to.
Yes, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's so weird that you should say that, because I was having a chat with my mum yesterday about how certain people give you permission to be creative in a certain way, or talk about things, or feel things, and I know exactly what you're saying. We shouldn't be, waiting for permission, but the reality is that, society has brought us up to kind of shutting us down in lots of different ways for lots of different people.
Absolutely.
And so if that's a way of opening that up, then going beyond those restrictions, then let's call it permission, if that's what works. And that's really powerful, and I can completely see that, and I could really relate to that. And I think that's exactly how I feel, actually, about sharing things. And, like, for example, like when I first shared about losing our daughter Alma, I had so many people come forward who said, "Oh, something similar happened to me, or to my relative, or to my friend, but I've never spoken about it before. But by me speaking about it, then they felt that they could come forward, and that's so valuable."
I feel like it sounds a bit dramatic when you said dramatic about my photographs. I was like, yeah, you got the measure of me. It sounds dramatic to say, but I genuinely feel like that is moving society forward, because like you say, we've all been taught for so long that, yeah, difficult things happen, but you just put your head down, don't talk about it, and get on with it. And that's what's created a lot of the damage, and that's what we need to move on from. And so the more people that there are having these open conversations and opening the conversations and continuing the dialogues, the more people that feel able to talk about their pain and process it rather than holding it all in. And then hopefully within a couple of generations, we won't have a lot of the problems that we're seeing now, with people not dealing with their issues.
Absolutely. That it always, this brings me back to a book that I read when I was 17, called An Intimate History of Humanity. I'm always banging on about it. It's one of those, one of those formative books that just make you see the world in a different way. And it was the book is a study on a few different women's lives, and I really want to revisit it. Actually, I've not read it in a while. And it's just about these women's lives and kind of how they respond to different aspects of their lives. And at the end of the book, the writer, he's male, but it's interesting that he chose women to write about. At the end of the book, he comes to the conclusion that as a whole humanity, we're at a really immature stage in our emotional growth. We're at the adolescence of emotional growth, and that we are, like you've just said, that we are developing and evolving emotionally, and that is what will be the evolution of society. So much more than the technical side or the industrial side. It's about humanity at the emotional education and development.
Yes. Wow. That's really profound,
isn't it? It's so, it really stuck me. I was like, oh my God, that's what it's all about.
It is. And I think when you were saying that, I was thinking, when you said it's like, well, what do you say? We're in adolescence.
Yeah.
When you think about how long we have been living in relative abundance for, in comparison to the grand scheme of humanity, it's not a huge amount. And obviously not everybody is living in abundance, but as a society as a whole, we've got, obviously things aren't being distributed properly, but there is more than enough to go around if it were to be distributed properly. Probably only very recently in the history of humanity. And it's sort of that going from surviving to thriving. And that's where we're sort of having that switch over now, moving from survival mode to thriving mode as a civilization, as it were.
Yeah. I feel like there's I know, like, it feels like the world is incredibly divided at the moment, and in so many different ways. It's like, where there can be division, there will be division.
Yeah.
But I also feel like there are conversations that are being had that are huge, and it's almost like it's that moment of something breaking, you know, of kind of like getting through. It's like there's all these splinters coming out, but actually what's coming out of this is really huge. It's conversations that I feel that have accelerated quite fast. And I know that, you know, sometimes it feels like we're getting absolutely nowhere. But at the same time, I think that I think especially the generation, I don't know, maybe my brother's generation, my brother's 27, maybe even like the generation before him, like what are they? Are they Gen Z? Is that who they are?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
I could point out a millennial. I think I'm Gen X. I don't know what the rest are.
I think you might be an elder millennial.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the
an elder.
cusp, because I think they draw the line for millennials at 1980, and I was born on the 28th of December 1979. So right on the cusp.
Okay.
Like a millenniax.
Who came up with these? But yeah, it's because, and I think, you know, how awful the internet is in many ways, it's also been pretty extraordinary because I have access to all these opinions and information and ways of learning about other people's lives that I would not have if it wasn't for this, you know, phone in my pocket.
Yes, that is exactly it. In fact, all that we bemoan social media, and in a lot of ways it is completely abhorrent. There are a lot of bad things about it, but I wouldn't be where or who I am now without it. And I think, like you say, with these movements and the moving on of the discourse that's happening wouldn't have been able to happen without social media and the internet. So, for example, like obviously I talk about race issues a lot on my grid, and one of my very early posts was like, I did a bunch of posts about why, you know, I'm not your get out of racism free card, because I have been racist against Black people in the past. Not like I walked down the street shouting slurs at people, but I had internalized white supremacy, and I still do have to a degree. And that's why I know that the majority of white people will also have internalized or externalized white supremacy, because if it can happen to me, it's definitely happening to you, because we're all growing up in the same white supremacist society.
Yeah.
You know, unless you've grown up in a very different culture, then it's in you.
Yeah.
And I didn't recognize it in me until, it's a very convoluted story, but I think the earliest days of it was I was in a feminist Facebook group about maybe about 7-8 years ago. It was Laura Bates's Everyday Sexism project.
Oh yeah.
There was a Facebook group, and I was a friend added me to that, and I obviously believed women should be treated equal and that, but I hadn't really been like into feminism. I would never have called myself a feminist. I wouldn't have said that I wasn't, but I probably wouldn't have used the term because I didn't really, if I'm being honest, understand it. So I learned a lot in that group, but I learned it's not just about feminism, it's about all intersections of, I mean, it kind of crumbled a little bit because the intersectionality wasn't amazing, but we did talk about a lot of the intersections. We talked about race, and we talked about gender, and we talked about gender identity and sexuality and all of those things in that group. So I learned loads in there. But it was from some of the women in there that I started sort of learning more about race and racial identity. And it all ties in with, I told you about tangents, yeah. So when my kids were small, my kids are mixed race, my husband's white. And when my kids were little, I was a childminder for a while. So I looked after several different children, but I would always push to the children, you need to embrace who you are, be happy with who you are. You know, there was a kid with glasses and we all would celebrate that, and you've got curly hair and we celebrate that, and you've got this colour skin and we celebrate that. And so we celebrated everybody equally, and I was very big on them loving themselves as they are, and it seems to have sunk in largely. But so my kids have got curly hair. My eldest son's got sort of closer to afro hair, and my younger son's got sort of loose, more European hair curls. And it was when my older son used to have his hair really long, and it was beautiful. It was amazing. It's like a lion's mane. And he always used to get loads of compliments on it. But all of a sudden he wanted his hair cut. And I didn't have a problem with it. I'd always said when he wanted it cut, he would get it cut. That was fine. But when I questioned him further about, I showed him on Pinterest, what kind of haircut might you like? And he said, I want it cut so it's straight like Daddy's. I was like, oh, bless you, because he was only probably about 5 or 6. I said, it doesn't work like that, sweetheart. You've got curly hair. It doesn't matter if you cut it, it's still going to be curly.
Yeah.
And we had a few chats about it, and eventually he decided he didn't want it cut, and that was fine. And then it was only sort of like a very temporary, maybe a few months blip where he didn't love his curly hair, and then he did again, because obviously he was the only kid in his class that had hair like that. We live in a very white area. There are a couple of other black kids at their school, a couple of mixed race kids, a couple of Asian kids. So there's a little bit of diversity, but not much. There might be 1 or 2 non-white children in a couple of classes. So it was sort of different in that way. But as far as I can glean from conversations I've had with him, he's never sort of had any racially motivated comments at school. My other son has on one occasion, and I spoke to the parent about it, and that didn't go particularly well. She didn't see colour, got loads of different race friends, and I was like, forget it, I'm just not going to interact with you like this. And she has later outed herself to be a complete racist last summer, so I hope all of her non-white friends that she claims to have are safe around her, is all I can say. I've gone off on a complete tangent, can't remember what. Oh yeah, so it was talking about the straight hair, and then, but ironically at the time I was still relaxing my hair, so that's like chemically treating afro hair to make it straight, and the hypocrisy just sort of hit me one day. I was like, yeah, maybe this is why he's getting mixed messages. So I decided to grow my hair out. But it was, I'm going on quite the tangent here, because it's been quite the journey, and I do intend to write about it at some point. But sort of growing up, it was always not for everybody, but within my sort of close family, it was sort of, you got to 13, you were allowed to either perm or relax your hair, and not have to wear it natural in braids all the time anymore. And it was like a big thing to look forward to. And yeah, there's so much to unpack there, so I won't go into depth in it. But so that's what I just did. When I turned 13, I got my hair permed for the first time, and I didn't stop perming it until I started relaxing it after my wedding, because I had it straight for my wedding and decided I liked it straight after that. So and so I think, was I like 30? I was probably in my early to mid 30s when I decided I was going to grow it out. And I just did not have a clue how to look after my natural afro hair. I had a little bit of a clue because I had been reading up online, learning how to deal with the kids' mixed hair. I think it was about that time that sort of natural hair movement started to take off. So I was able to find resources, not as many as there are now. I mean, it's just like easy as pie now, but back then you had to sort of root around a little bit. But before that, before the internet, the sort of just wasn't really out there unless you had close family members who were also wearing their hair natural and loose, because it was sort of like, if you had your hair natural, it was either in dreadlocks or you had it in like proper braids, or you had a weave or whatever. And I never really wanted any of those things. So, and it was always seen as a bit of a political statement to sort of wear afro hair. And I think it is less so now, but I think that's part of the wider issue of people being happy in their own skin, and the way they were made is generally seen as a political decision in a lot of cases now. You know, if you're in a black body, if you're in a bigger body, if you're in a female body, if you're just happy in that body, it seems to be bucking the norm or the societal expectation. And hopefully we're at a turning point for that now as well. And so people used to say to me, oh, why don't you wear your hair in braids? And even that to me seemed like a bit of a bold statement about a person who I didn't see myself as being, because I'd grown up surrounded by white people and I kind of considered myself to be just like them, but with black skin, which is obviously ridiculous to me now, but it's only very recently that this realizations, and not recently, like in the past couple of weeks, but in recent years, that realizations dawned on me. And even last year, I sort of realized that although externally I had, sort of started embracing my natural hair and wearing hair wraps and embracing the culture a bit more, I hadn't actually verbalized that self-acceptance to anybody. So the way that I had been sort of assimilating myself, or had assimilated myself into predominantly white friendship groups, and basically every group that I was in was predominantly white, was by not emphasizing my difference, not commenting on it, not drawing any attention to it. If someone sort of microaggressed me, I would just let it go because I didn't want to draw attention to myself as being different. Then I was sort of acknowledged that I had not an amount of blame, but had to accept some of the responsibility for the fact that my friends didn't acknowledge my blackness because I had never drawn attention to it. So in a way, they didn't see colour because I had never allowed or encouraged them to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for them to say, oh, I've got black friend, I don't see colour, it kind of would be because they have never been forced or asked to acknowledge the differences between me and my life and them and their lives.
Yeah, or maybe didn't have the words or felt comfortable talking about it. Because
I think pretty much would just never come up.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's impossible to not see colour.
Yeah.
We are all glaringly obviously different, and that I feel like that I don't see colours. It's a bit of a get out. It's like, yeah, but the reality is we are, like, you see the difference between curly hair or straight hair, and I understand it's meant to be a kind of like a generous, magnanimous, like, I don't see colour, love see no colour, whatever. It's a lovely idea, but the reality is that we don't. I think white people have often chosen that as quite an easy get out, from having to talk about it, something that probably a lot of white people feel really uncomfortable about because of internalized racism, and having to, maybe acknowledge that, maybe that bringing up feelings that they don't quite understand or know how to articulate. I don't know. This is me just kind of thinking out loud or guessing. I
think there is an element of that, but I think that there's also an element for so long. So people have kind of been taught not to see colour, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's just not something that you've been allowed. So as a white person, it's not something that you've been allowed, and I don't mean by black people, I mean by other white people, to talk about. So for example, there's so many things where I'll go, I'm supposed to write a post about this. I did a Facebook post back in the days when I hung out in that cesspit, but I try to stay away from there now, about there was a little boy when I was childminding, and one day he just kicked off and refused to hold my hand on the way to school. So this was at a period where I had stopped my own childminding business, and I was managing another childminder's business for a couple of days a week so she could take some time off for maternity leave. And so she had 2 assistants, and then there was me managing them on these days. And this little boy refused to hold my hand on the school run. And one of the assistants told him off. She was like, just hold Emma's hand. Why are you being so stupid? And I got down and I said to him, why do you not want to hold my hand? And he just went, it's dirty. And he was about 3 or 4. And so I just said to him, it's not dirty, look, my hands are brown, like the rest of my skin's brown, and your hands are white. I just have different coloured hands. And he just sort of shrugged and went, oh, okay, and held my hand. And we walked the rest of the way to school. But had I not been there, or had he said that probably to the assistant rather than to me. I mean, I don't know because it didn't happen, but my assumption is that she would have said, don't be so ridiculous. That's rude. We don't say things like that. Just come along. And a parent, I know, would have just been horrified and gone, don't be so ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? So as children, we're taught we're not allowed to comment on these differences, even though we can see that they're there. So we just ignore. So rather than I don't see colour, it's I ignore colour.
Yeah.
Which in a way is fine if you're saying I don't judge people based on colour. But in another way, it can be harmful if you don't acknowledge the differences that colour is going to make to that person's life. And I have another anecdote, sorry, that illustrates this fact. I was with a group of, let's call them acquaintances. And one of them she was just making a joke, but it was really hurtful at the time. And I took it really badly. And the outcome wasn't great. So basically there were a group of us standing together and she was talking about how she'd been to a Star Wars convention or something, or the kids had, and she was saying something about Chewbacca, and she drew a comparison to me, and sort of everyone just carried on and had a little laugh. I can't remember what the joke was. It was something that could have been taken innocently, and she could have said it about anyone else in the group and it would have been fine. But the fact that she didn't see or didn't acknowledge colour meant that she didn't get that to compare a black person to a sort of ape-like creature was not appropriate at all. And I just walked away because it was time to go. And I didn't say anything at the time. And I spent the whole day stewing on it because I didn't know this person very well. And I didn't know if maybe she was racist or if she just hadn't considered it. And I spent the whole day feeling sick because I knew I had to say something. I knew I couldn't face these people again without addressing it. And I didn't know how they were going to respond. And we're talking probably about 5 years ago now. So it was before a lot of what's now common discourse that's happening now was happening. So I had to come back, work, looking after children, whilst trying to work out how I was going to handle this. And I think in the end, I sent a group text to everyone that had been involved. And I just sort of said, look, I don't know what was meant by this, but it's not appropriate to make jokes comparing Black people to any chimp or ape-like creature. And if someone does it in front of you, the right thing to do isn't just sort of laugh it off. The right thing to do is to call it out. And then I spent the rest of the day feeling sick, waiting for anyone to respond. And obviously, I'm sure that you can imagine, having seen what you've seen recently, what happened was a bunch of fragility, a bunch of gaslighting. Oh, it wasn't meant like that. Oh, she would never say anything to be hurtful, blah, blah, blah. And I ended up feeling like crap. And yeah, it was just all a very horrible experience. But that's what comes as a result of not seeing colour. You can't see me doing the bunny ears, but that's what I'm doing. If you don't see the differences and understand how things land differently according to your life experience, then that's how these things happen. And if it does, then the right thing to do is hold your hands up and say, sorry, I didn't realise that it could be interpreted that way. I will do better in future. Not, I didn't mean it that way. You're taking it wrong. Which is what there's been a lot of in the past, and I'm hoping that there'll be less of. But because it's been pandemic, since I've had a lot of these later realizations and realized that other people, I mean, it seems ridiculous to say I didn't realize other people had the same experience and felt the same, but you don't, because you just, and that's another reason social media has been so great. I mean, me and Nadia from Century have had lots of conversations about how it's great to have this like Instagram community where you find people who've had, you might have been the only Black child in your school, but there are hundreds of thousands of other children who were also the only Black child at their school, and you would have never met them before social media. And now we can all talk to each other and share our experiences and how it made us feel and process it together, rather than just feeling like we were the one being oversensitive or we were, all these other things. It's so incredibly validating and affirming to know that it's not great to know that other people suffered the same, but also to know that other people have felt the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. So because are you South Manchester?
Stockport, so south of Manchester.
Right, okay. And
We like to think of ourselves as Manchester if we can.
So did you grow up around there as well?
No, I grew up in a small mining town in Nottinghamshire, Eastwood, where D.H. Lawrence is from. But yeah, I've been in Manchester since I was 18, so more than half my life now. I think I count as an honorary Manc.
Absolutely, definitely.
I came up to go to uni and been here ever since. I had a brief stay in Preston for a year. Yeah.
And what did you study at uni in Manchester?
I did biological sciences. I wasn't at Manchester University. I feel like I should add a disclaimer there. I wasn't quite clever enough to get into Manchester. I went to Salford Uni.
Which is a brilliant university.
It is also a brilliant university. I'm so glad that I did.
So you studied
biological sciences. So I started off doing biochemistry, but I hate chemistry. There was far too much maths. So after the first term, I switched on to biological sciences.
Right. And is that something that you had had that always been a strength of yours growing up? Sciences.
So I had always done well in science until my A levels, which I didn't do particularly well in any of them, to be honest. But yeah, that's what my teachers were always. Emma's brilliant in science. Emma should do science. So that's kind of what I did. And it's interesting when you were saying about sort of what you wanted to do when you were older and what drove you into what you were doing. And it was all chance, I think. I just did what other people said that I wanted to do.
As in what other people saw you were good at?
Yes.
Right.
So I always wanted to be an actor or a television presenter.
I can see you doing both of those things.
But again, back to the racing, you just did not see many people that looked like me on the television.
Yeah.
In fact, I used to get called either, oh God, her name's just gone out of my head. Moira Stewart or Floella Benjamin. I'd get called all the time. Didn't look like either of those people, clearly.
They would come in on TV. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just didn't really feel like an option that was available to me. I did performing arts at A level, but again, I sort of had in my head that you had to be able to do all of the performing arts to go into performing arts, and you will have never heard me sing, and you probably never will. And there's a very good reason for that. So I was like, you're too down already. You can't sing, and you don't look like you should be on TV. So everyone said I was good at science, so I did that instead.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy science?
I did enjoy it. I do enjoy it. And my kids are very much into science as well. They love science too, so that's nice. But I will try to avoid pushing them towards it. But they do enjoy it. So
yes. So what's that led you into?
So now my full job title is a clinical scientist in histocompatibility and immunogenetics.
Good God.
Which is not a good one to say when you've had a couple.
Wow, that's so impressive.
It sounds good, doesn't it? I spend most of my time moving data from one place to another, but it sounds good.
Wow, that is a job title and a half.
So I wanted to be a microbiologist. All the way through uni, sounds ridiculous, mad about parasites. I was obsessed. I loved parasites. Such a dweeb. I just found them fascinating. And so my year out at uni, I did a 4-year degree, and I had a year out working for public health. Oh, well, it's Public Health England now, but back then it was the Public Health Laboratory Service. I had a charming job. I was a laboratory assistant, and basically my job was to, when the fecal samples came in, I had to transfer a little bit of them into a special diluent that we would use to amplify any bacteria that were in there, and categorize them based on whether they were solid, semi-solid or liquid when they came in.
Lovely. I mean, good preparation for motherhood, really.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, not the nicest job in the world. So I loved working there, and I wanted to be a clinical scientist in microbiology. So everyone that wants to be a clinical scientist applies to a central place, and they divvy out the people into the different disciplines. So on the application form, you could put 4 choices down. I think, was there only one place doing microbiology? And so I was like, oh, well, don't know what else I'd want to do. But this thing's in Manchester and quite happily go back there. So I'll put that down. And that was H&I. And I didn't get offered an interview for microbiology, but I got offered an interview for H&I. So here I am. So I was really lucky to get offered the job, because I think they had 80 people apply. So yeah, there was only supposed to be one job, and they couldn't decide between the girl that I went to uni with, Alison, and myself. So in the end, they decided to try and see if they could create 2 posts, and they did. So we both got a job.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. So it was, really lucky to get in there, to be honest, out of, all those people that wanted to go. So then what happened? So yeah, I'll tell you a bit about what it is. So on a day-to-day basis, a lot of what I do is data entry, supervision of sample transfers, supervision of junior members of staff, and admin, basically. But the exciting bit is, and the bit that's kind of the worst bit of the job as well, is the on-call. And yeah, I know you've heard me moan about it.
Yeah. It sounds grueling.
So what we do as a discipline, H&I, is the histocompatibility is basically tissue matching. So histo is cells and compatibility, clearly, you know what that means. So we're trying to match tissues, and immunogenetics is the genetics behind the immune response. So we're trying to match organs we're trying to match tissues for organ transplants and bone marrow transplants, and also do antibody screening for the patients to make sure that they're not going to reject those transplants.
Wow. So that's interesting that you have this whole scientific career, which is fascinating and that you find exciting and interesting, and and of course tiring and exhausting. I mean, it sounds like a really all-consuming job, and also kind of sounds like it really has been your calling in some ways, but that there's also another part of yourself that is your other calling, which, like, you were talking about, like the creative side, like when you're wanting to be an actor or performer, and it feels like that's coming out in your photography, because there's definitely a performance element to your photos. You don't try and pretend like you're just being caught unawares drinking a coffee, looking out the window.
No.
It's very staged and very dramatic, I was saying. So that's really interesting that you found, in a way, you've kind of found your way back to it, but in a position where you have control over the narrative. And
very much that's what it has been about, taking control of the narrative, of who I actually am, rather than just allowing other people to make their decisions about, well, I mean, people still can make their decisions about who I am, but sort of my art is me saying, this is who I am. And yeah, I didn't really ever have a creative outlet until photography. So I feel very much like that's given me that creativity and that outlet and a voice in many ways, because I mean, I can write. I've never really written anything for anyone else to read since school days, really. And it has always, so at school it was always very much about the science and the arts. So I think the A-levels that I took, I did chemistry, biology, performing arts and English lit. So
right, wow.
It was always very much about wanting a balance of those things. And it was when I went to university that I kind of had to choose. And like, I suppose, like a lot of people that don't have a creative family that they come from, or some kind of other external validation saying, yes, pursue a career in the arts, I just thought, well, I'm never going to make any money doing those things. Go do the safe thing. And that's what I did. And that's fine. That's how I am where I am. But it's been really liberating for me to find a creative outlet and find my voice, and sort of do the writing that I really enjoy, and it's like the photography was the sort of conduit, but the writing now is a lot of it for me as well. And because my photography is very much reliant on, it's like really hard to get time to shoot when there's light, and all the, you know, the moon needs to align with the stars in this order for me to be able to get a chance to shoot. So I spend the time in between when I can, because obviously you can write whenever. So in snatches of time, writing.
Yeah. And that really comes across, because like when I see that you've posted something, I'll like make sure that I've, you know, sat down, I've got a brew.
Oh, that's lovely. That's so nice.
No, it's true, because I want to really pay attention to what, you know, to what you're saying, because it always goes so much deeper than just, oh, I've had a bit of a naff day and I've shouted at the kids. You know what I mean? There's big themes in there, and there's really personal themes, and I always come away from it thinking, you know, it kind of always brings up questions, often like what you write, and because you don't, you know, you take no prisoners, you really.
I do filter some stuff out, but I like to try and make sure I get my point across, but maybe just lose a little bit of the vitriol, because I think sometimes, and I suppose in a way I am tone policing myself, which is not ideal, but I do want people to listen to what I'm saying. So I don't want them to immediately get their hackles up and go defensive and refuse to interact with the post.
Yes.
But yeah, it still does end up quite hard hitting, I suppose.
Yeah, that's interesting when you talk about like, tone policing yourself, because there's lots of conversations at the moment. I mean, there have been for a long time, but especially at the moment about like in the Houses of Parliament.
Yeah.
The politician that somebody said, you know, watch your tone.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you've mentioned that about yourself, about tone policing yourself, because this isn't like I'm talking about myself in a completely different context, but I recently have been a couple of things. I've just been like, look, if you're going to send me messages about what, don't bother. I'm going to block you, whatever.
Yeah.
And I felt so nervous about coming across as aggressive, and then I did another one about please don't send me unsolicited advice. You know. Check me setting up boundaries, and I felt like I had to really kind of make a joke about it because I didn't want people to feel instantly upset or guarded or defensive, I suppose defensive, and I wanted to be able to like you say, put across your message and for it to be heard without emotions coming up. You know, and it's tiny, it's really small what I'm talking about. Like, it's not.
No, but it's all part of this bigger thing. And I thought as soon as you said that, because we've always, as women, we've always been told, you're too emotional, you know, stop being so emotional about things. And also told if you want things, you need to ask for them nicely. Yeah. And you need to, that's basically the way we've been taught to play by society. And the reason we feel anxious when we don't do it is because we're going against everything we've been taught.
Yeah, and to be grateful for what you get.
Yeah.
Like, but that's not what I need or want. Yeah, but you know, be grateful for it.
But what I feel, like when I saw you set that boundary, I was like, yes, you go, girl. When I see other people setting boundaries, I'm all like, go. And when it comes to me setting a boundary, I'm like,
I know. It's tough, and I guess I can really see with like how that must be sometimes a bit of a push and pull with you, because what you're writing about is so kind of like from within and but like you articulate it in such an incredible way that is very cerebral, but it's also what you're saying is can often be very emotional. But you manage to get such a perfect balance that comes across that I feel things, but I also think at the same time. It's not just a kind of like a gushing of emotion. It really works on both levels, and I think that's one of the reasons why your writing is just so powerful. And also like your vocabulary, bloody hell, you used a word the other day and I had to go and Google it.
I probably had to Google it to find out how to spell it. Sorry, I'm all sat curled around my hands on my heart again. Such lovely things to say.
It's all true though. It's so true. It's, you know, yeah, so back into like to you and like how you were talking about how like the photography has kind of become a conduit, which has then led on to the writing, and like you were saying that it's not just Instagram posts that you're writing. You've been writing pages and pages of
Yeah, it
stuff.
doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's
It's not just in a scrappy notebook.
It doesn't need to go, does it? It doesn't need to go anywhere. And I think that's brilliant, because then there's a freedom to it. There's a freedom to what you're writing. You can write anything. You don't have to be thinking, well, is this ever gonna turn into a book? Does this fit a plot? You can be uncensored and just write, and that's where the gold is.
Have you ever done or heard about morning pages?
Yeah, from The Artist's Way.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I did that for a while, but it wasn't for me. So most of the things that I write are on a subject, and they are with the intention of doing something with them. It's just that I'm a massive procrastinator and I get distracted easily. So that's why they're all still in the notebook. But part of the reason that I haven't been posting as regularly to Instagram is because they hacked me off by removing my photographs. And calling them solicitation, which infuriated me.
Wow.
And part of it is because I feel like I'm putting a lot of work into, I mean, you'll understand this, you put a lot of work into an Instagram post.
Yeah.
You've got to prepare your photo, you've got to edit it, you've got to write a caption, you've got to store your hashtags. I sort of sat there thinking, and then interact with your post, which I don't count as a chore. That is the interaction why I do it. But it got to the point where it was feeling a bit like a job. And I was like, I don't use Instagram for my business because I don't have a business. Why is it taking this much of my time and energy? And I would like to turn my art into a business of some sort. And I'm not quite sure how or what that would look like at the moment. But what the next step for me is getting my work onto my own website. So I'm sort of hanging back I will be putting stuff on Instagram, but I'm not being a slave to it. And I love stories. Oh my God, I love storying. So that's where I'm most active on Instagram. And I do sometimes, I like the big interaction that comes after a post, because I just like people. I like interacting with people. I like it when a meaty post gets loads of like thoughtful comments, and I can use them and use it to feed more posts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to focus a little bit on getting my stuff together for my website, which I have no idea how to do, but James is very kindly said that he'll do it for me.
Oh, that's lovely. I think that's really, really wise, because I think in a way then what you're seeing Instagram as being like a step, a tool
Yeah.
to help bring out those aspects that you then want to carry on further. And I'm reading so much at the moment about creativity and business without social media, and how it is possible. And I'm doing a course at the moment about marketing without social media, because I feel very nervous about it, because I put so much time into it, and I kind of like started off it was just like a diary, and I take photos of our home, and then that grew into something bigger, and I documented my rediscovery of drawing and illustrating, and then that kind of tied in with our home, and I was drawing our home, and people were asking about things in our home. I was like, oh, maybe I could take this further. But similar, I'm kind of at a stage now, it's like, you know what, I need to be focusing more energy on the website and on sending out newsletters and blogs, and not being at the mercy of the Instagram gods, like you're saying, taking down your post and then being so fucking offensive at the same time about it. And what they choose to take down and don't choose, take down. I don't know that I want to be part of that. It's about understanding Instagram for what it is and for what it has been, and then moving on from it. And maybe giving up, maybe not. I don't know, but I think it does definitely need to grow, because you can't. How do you say it? You can't limit your creativity to what an app on on your phone says is valid.
Yeah.
It's got to be bigger. It's got to be free, and it's got to be uncomfortable, and not always entertainment, which is something that seems to be being fed. The idea of that. So I think, and that's why I love following you. and find your work so interesting. So yeah.
Do you know what? When we kept trying to arrange this, I was like, oh, it'd be lovely if we could just meet in person. It would be really lovely just to have a chat and a coffee with Java. And then, like, weeks ago when Jo first said she was meeting you, I was like, oh, I'm jealous. I'd like to come and meet Java and Laurie.
Yeah, that will happen. Let's do it. I feel like we've kind of covered just the depths of humanity.
The very depths.
The very depths and the very spectacular, the very dramatic, the very ethereal. It's all been covered. And I knew it would. I always knew we would.
Oh, it's been so much fun.
You can find Emma Goulding on Instagram at mgo.grows, where she shares her photo self-portraits and personal thoughts. All books and Instagram accounts mentioned are listed in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to On the Irregular. Please make sure you review and subscribe, as it helps other listeners find us. It really does make a difference.